Robert had been driving the number 47 bus route for almost 15 years. He knew every pothole, every traffic light, and nearly every regular passenger by face, if not by name. At 52 years old, he'd seen just about everything you could see from a driver's seat. Or so he thought. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when he first noticed her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with tangled blonde hair that looked like it hadn't seen a brush in weeks. She climbed up the bus steps all by herself, no parent in sight, and held out a crumpled bus pass with her small fingers. Robert glanced at the pass, then looked behind her, expecting to see an adult rushing to catch up. Nobody came. The girl just stood there, waiting patiently with eyes that seemed too serious for a child her age. They were an unusual color, somewhere between blue and purple, like the sky right before a storm. "You okay there, sweetheart?" Robert asked gently. "Where's your mom or dad?" The girl didn't answer. She just walked past him and sat down in the seat right behind the driver's area, hugging a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. The toy was missing an ear, and its white fur had turned grayish from years of handling. Robert watched her in his rearview mirror as he pulled back into traffic. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him, but he couldn't exactly refuse to let a child ride the bus. She had a valid pass. Still, what kind of parent sends a little kid out alone at 6:45 in the morning? The next day she was there again. Same time, same crumpled pass, same worn-out clothes. Robert started paying closer attention. The girl always got off at Henderson Street, near some old apartment buildings that had seen better days. She never smiled, never talked, just rode the bus staring out the window or sleeping against the glass. By the end of the first week, Robert had mentioned it to his wife, Patricia. They'd been married for 28 years, and Patricia had worked with kids her whole life before retiring from social services. She knew troubled children when she heard about them. "That's not normal, Bobby," Patricia said over dinner that Friday. "A child that young shouldn't be traveling alone, especially not at that hour. Is anyone picking her up at her stop?" Robert shook his head. "I can't see from where I am, but I've never noticed anyone waiting. She just gets off and walks toward those old buildings on Henderson." "You need to keep an eye on her," Patricia said firmly. "Something's wrong there." The following Monday, Robert made a point to watch more carefully. The girl boarded as usual, but this time he noticed something that made his stomach turn. There were bruises on her thin arms, the kind that looked like finger marks. Her clothes, the same purple t-shirt and jeans she'd worn all last week, had stains that looked like they'd never been washed. "Hey there," Robert said as she showed her pass. "What's your name, honey?" For the first time, the girl looked directly at him. Those strange violet blue eyes met his for just a moment before she looked down at her shoes. "Lily," she whispered, so quiet he almost didn't hear. "That's a pretty name. I'm Robert." He smiled, trying to seem friendly and safe. "Where are you heading this early, Lily?" But she'd already moved past him to her usual seat, clutching that raggedy rabbit like it was the only friend she had in the world. Robert wanted to press further, but the morning commuters were piling on behind her, grumbling about the delay. Throughout that week, Robert tried different approaches. He'd say good morning extra cheerfully. He'd comment on the weather. Once he asked if she liked school. Lily barely responded to any of it, just giving him quick glances before retreating into her silent world. It was Thursday morning, pouring rain, when things changed. Lily climbed onto the bus completely soaked. Her hair was plastered to her head, water dripping from her clothes onto the floor. She was shivering so hard her teeth chattered, and she wasn't wearing a jacket. Robert felt something snap inside him. This wasn't just concerning anymore. This was neglect, plain and simple. No responsible adult sends a child out in weather like this without proper clothing. "Hold on a second, sweetheart," he said, setting the parking brake. He reached for his own jacket, a thick windbreaker he kept behind his seat for emergencies. "Here, put this on. You're freezing." Lily stared at the jacket like she couldn't believe someone was offering her something. Slowly, she reached out and took it, wrapping it around her small frame. It was huge on her, hanging almost to her knees, but at least it was dry and warm. Robert also pulled out his lunch bag and found the granola bar Patricia had packed. "You hungry? You can have this." For the first time since he'd started seeing her, Lily's expression changed. Her eyes got wide and her lower lip trembled slightly. She took the granola bar with both hands and whispered, "Thank you, mister." Those 3 words hit Robert harder than he expected. The way she said them, like she wasn't used to people being kind to her, like a simple granola bar was the best thing that had happened to her in a long time. As he drove his route that morning, Robert couldn't stop glancing in the mirror at Lily. She'd curled up in the seat, wrapped in his jacket, and fallen asleep with the half-eaten granola bar still clutched in her hand. She slept hard, the way exhausted children do, and didn't wake up even when they reached Henderson Street. Robert made a decision that would have gotten him in trouble with his supervisor. Instead of announcing her stop and moving on, he let her sleep. He completed his entire route, turned around, and drove back. Lily finally woke up an hour later, confused and frightened. "It's okay," Robert said quickly. "You fell asleep, so I just let you rest. But you're back at your stop now. Do you have someone at home? Someone taking care of you?" Lily's face closed off immediately. She stood up, handed him back his jacket, and moved toward the door without a word. Robert wanted to stop her, to demand answers, but what could he do? He wasn't her parent. He wasn't anyone official. He was just a bus driver who happened to notice. That evening, Patricia listened to the whole story with growing concern. "Bobby, you need to report this. That child needs help." "I know," Robert said, running his hands through his graying hair. "But what if they can't find her? What if she runs? At least now I see her every day. At least I know she's alive." "Then keep seeing her every day," Patricia said, her mind already working. "Build trust. Let her know you're safe. I'll start packing extra food. We'll figure this out." The next morning, Robert had a brown paper bag waiting. When Lily boarded, he held it out. "My wife packed too much lunch again," he lied with a gentle smile. "Would you do me a favor and help me eat it?" "I can't stand wasting food." Lily hesitated, then took the bag. Inside was a sandwich, an apple, some crackers, and a juice box. She looked up at Robert with those haunting eyes, and for just a second he saw something crack in her careful composure. "Thank you," she said again, and this time there was something else in her voice. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of trust. As the days went on, this became their routine. Robert would have food waiting. Lily would accept it with quiet gratitude. She started staying awake during the rides, sometimes looking at picture books that Patricia had added to the daily care packages. She even started talking a little bit, sharing small things about her life in careful, measured words. But with each conversation, Robert's worry grew deeper. Because the picture Lily was painting, piece by tiny piece, was of a child living in circumstances no kid should ever have to endure, and he knew that soon just giving her food and kindness wouldn't be enough. Something had to change. He just didn't know yet that when it did, it would change everything in ways he could never have imagined. 3 weeks passed, and Robert's morning routine had completely changed. He now woke up 30 minutes earlier so Patricia could prepare proper meals for Lily. Not just snacks, but real food. Sandwiches with turkey and cheese, hard-boiled eggs, cut-up vegetables with ranch dressing, cookies that Patricia baked fresh every few days. Lily had started to look a little healthier. Her cheeks had more color and she didn't seem quite as thin. But more importantly, she was beginning to open up. Not a lot, but enough that Robert could piece together fragments of her story. "Do you go to school, Lily?" Robert asked one morning as she settled into her usual seat with that day's breakfast bag. She shook her head, looking down at her lap. "Not anymore. Uncle Vincent says school costs too much money." Uncle Vincent. That was the first time she'd mentioned a name. Robert kept his voice casual even though his heart was pounding. "Your uncle takes care of you?" "Yeah. Since..." Lily trailed off, her small hand tightening around her stuffed rabbit. "Since a long time. What about your mom and dad?" Lily's face went completely blank, like someone had turned off a light switch. "Uncle Vincent says they're gone. He says nobody else wanted me, but he was nice enough to take me." Robert felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept it off his face. What kind of person tells a child that nobody wants them? He glanced at Lily in the mirror. She was carefully opening the lunch bag, pulling out the sandwich Patricia had wrapped in colorful paper decorated with little stars. "Well, I think you're a pretty special kid," Robert said warmly, "and I'm glad I get to see you every morning. You make driving this route better." Lily looked up at him with surprise, like she couldn't quite believe what she'd heard. Then, for the first time since he'd known her, she smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. Over the next few days, Lily shared more details. She and Uncle Vincent moved around a lot. They'd been in Seattle for about 4 months now. Before that, she remembered living in other cities, but they all blurred together. She slept on a couch in their apartment. Uncle Vincent worked at night, which was why she was alone so much. "Where do you go on the bus every day?" Robert finally asked. It had been bothering him for weeks. "Nowhere," Lily said simply. "I just ride. Uncle Vincent gets mad if I make noise in the apartment during the day when he's sleeping. He says if I can't be quiet, I should leave. So I leave." Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This child was essentially homeless during daylight hours, riding the bus in circles because she had nowhere else to go. 7 years old, and her only refuge was a city bus driven by a stranger who happened to care. "Lily, honey, that's not okay," Robert said gently. "Kids should be in school. Kids should have a safe home where they can play and make noise and just be kids." "Uncle Vincent says I should be grateful," Lily said, her voice getting smaller. "He says I'm lucky he took me in when nobody else would." That night, Robert and Patricia had a long conversation at their kitchen table. Patricia had her reading glasses on, looking at printouts she'd made about child welfare services and missing children databases. "Bobby, we need to call someone," Patricia said firmly. "This has gone beyond just giving her food. This child is being neglected, maybe worse. Those bruises you mentioned seeing—" "I know," Robert interrupted. "But Patty, I'm scared. What if they can't help her? What if the system fails her? What if Vincent moves them again and we never see her? Never know if she's okay?" Patricia reached across the table and took her husband's hand. "And what if we do nothing and something terrible happens? We'd never forgive ourselves." Robert knew she was right, but before he could agree, Patricia continued, "Let's give it one more week. Build more trust. See if she'll tell us more about where she lives, about this uncle. Get enough information that when we do call the authorities, they'll actually be able to help her." So Robert kept up his routine, but started asking more careful questions. He learned that Lily and Vincent lived in the Riverside Apartments, the rundown complex on Henderson Street. She didn't know the apartment number, but she could describe which building and which floor. He also noticed other things. The way Lily flinched when people raised their voices. How she'd apologize for tiny things like accidentally dropping a wrapper. The way she seemed surprised every single day that Robert was still happy to see her. Like she expected him to get tired of her and tell her to go away. What struck Robert most was how smart she was. Despite not going to school, Lily could read the children's books Patricia sent. She knew big words that seemed unusual for a 7-year-old, and she had this formal way of speaking sometimes, like she was choosing her words very carefully. "Where did you learn to talk so proper?" Robert asked one day, genuinely curious. Lily looked confused by the question. "I don't know. I've always talked like this, I think. Uncle Vincent says I sound weird, like I'm pretending to be fancy." There was also her accent. Robert couldn't quite place it. Most of the time, Lily sounded American, but occasionally certain words came out different with a slight lilt that seemed European. When he mentioned it to Patricia, she found it odd too. Maybe she lived abroad before, Patricia suggested, or maybe this Vincent person isn't even American. "Bobby, there's something really strange about this whole situation." Then came the Wednesday morning that changed everything. Robert waited at the usual stop at 6:45. 6:50 came and went. 7 o'clock. Lily didn't show up. Robert felt panic rising in his chest. He ran his route, constantly checking the stops, hoping maybe she'd just been late. She wasn't there. He called Patricia during his break, his voice shaking. She didn't come. "Patty, what if something happened? What if he hurt her? What if they moved?" Patricia's voice was calm but firm. "Finish your shift, come home. We'll figure out what to do." Thursday morning. No Lily. Robert barely slept Wednesday night, imagining the worst. He drove his route in a fog, missing turns he'd made thousands of times. Friday morning. Still no Lily. Robert was beside himself. He'd grown attached to this little girl, he realized. She'd become part of his life, and now she was gone, and he didn't know how to find her. Saturday and Sunday crawled by. Robert drove past the Riverside Apartments on his own time, but there were hundreds of units. He couldn't just start knocking on doors. Monday morning, Robert was driving almost on autopilot, his heart heavy. He pulled up to the usual stop at Henderson Street, expecting nothing. And there she was. Lily stood at the bus stop, but she looked different. Worse. She had a black eye that was still purple and swollen. Her lip was split, and something in her expression had changed. The small spark of hope that had been growing over the past weeks was gone. Robert's vision actually blurred with tears as she climbed the steps. He wanted to grab her and drive straight to the police station, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Lily," he said softly. "Oh, honey. What happened?" She didn't answer, just moved toward her seat. Robert put the bus in park and turned around in his seat, breaking every rule about staying on schedule. "Lily, please. Talk to me. Did Vincent do this to you?" For a long moment, she just stared at the floor. Then so quietly he almost didn't hear, she said, "He got mad because I ate some of his food. I was hungry. The food you give me, it runs out, and sometimes there's nothing else." Something broke in Robert's chest. "Sweetheart, listen to me. I want to help you. Really help you. Not just with food, but help you get somewhere safe. Would you let me do that?" Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "There's nowhere safe. Uncle Vincent says I can't tell anyone about him or they'll put me in jail. He says it's my fault if people get mad at him." "That's not true," Robert said firmly. "None of this is your fault. You're a kid. You deserve to be taken care of properly. You deserve to be safe." "But where would I go?" Lily asked, and she sounded so lost, so small. "My wife and I, we want to help. We have a safe house. We can call people who know how to deal with situations like this, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Lily looked at him for a long time. Robert could see her thinking it through, weighing her limited options. Finally she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I trust you, Robert." Hearing her say his name for the first time, Robert had to clear his throat to speak. Okay, good. After my shift today, will you come with me? I'll bring you home to meet Patricia. We'll figure this out together." Lily nodded again, still clutching that ratty stuffed rabbit. The rest of Robert's shift was the longest of his life. He called Patricia during his lunch break and told her everything. She said she'd prepare the guest room and contact a friend who still worked in child services to find out the right way to proceed. When Robert finally finished his route that afternoon, Lily was waiting at the last stop like they'd planned. She looked terrified but determined. As they walked to Robert's car, she suddenly grabbed his hand. "Robert," she said, "can I tell you something? But you have to promise not to think I'm crazy." "I promise, sweetheart." Lily took a deep breath. "I don't think Uncle Vincent is really my uncle. And I don't think my name was always Lily. Sometimes I have these dreams, these memories maybe of a different place, a big house with gardens and lots of people, and someone used to call me." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Never mind. You'll think I'm making things up." Robert knelt down to her level, right there on the sidewalk. "Lily, I will never think you're making things up. Whatever you remember, whatever you feel, it's real to you, and that's what matters. We're going to figure out your story, okay? All of it." As they drove toward his house, Robert had no idea how true those words would turn out to be. Patricia was waiting at the door when Robert pulled into their driveway. She'd been pacing for an hour, preparing herself to meet the little girl her husband had been telling her about for weeks. But nothing quite prepared her for the reality of Lily stepping out of the car, clutching a filthy stuffed rabbit with a black eye and split lip, looking at their modest house like it was a palace. "Hello, sweetheart," Patricia said, her voice gentle and warm in the way that had calmed hundreds of frightened children over her career. "I'm Patricia. We're so glad you're here. Are you hungry?" Lily nodded shyly, staying close to Robert's side. The three of them went inside, and Patricia had to fight back tears at how the child's eyes widened at their simple, clean living room. What kind of conditions had she been living in that a regular house seemed amazing? Patricia had made chicken soup and fresh bread. As Lily ate, slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, Patricia and Robert exchanged worried glances. The child was severely underweight. Her clothes hadn't been washed in who knows how long, and those injuries on her face made Patricia's blood boil. "Lily, honey," Patricia said after the girl had finished her second bowl of soup, "would it be okay if I looked at your eye? I used to be a nurse, and I just want to make sure you're healing properly." Lily hesitated, then nodded. As Patricia gently examined her face, she noticed other things. Scars on Lily's arms that looked old, bruising at different stages of healing. This wasn't a one-time incident. This was ongoing. "Sweetie, I need to check something else, okay? There's a mark on your shoulder, and I just want to make sure it's not from being hurt." As Patricia carefully moved Lily's collar aside, she froze. There on the child's left shoulder blade was a birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon. Patricia had spent 30 years working with children, and she'd learned to catalog details without even thinking about it. Something about this particular birthmark tickled at her memory, but she couldn't place why. After Patricia finished her examination and declared that while the injuries looked painful, They would heal. She got Lily set up in their guest room with some of her granddaughter's old clothes. The items were a bit big, but they were clean and whole, and Lily touched them like they were made of gold. "You can take a bath if you'd like," Patricia offered. "I'll get you some towels and some nice soap." "Take your time, honey. You're safe here." While Lily bathed, Patricia returned to the kitchen where Robert was washing dishes with shaking hands. They could hear the water running upstairs, and both found themselves fighting tears. "We're calling child services tomorrow," Patricia said firmly. "This can't wait any longer." "I know," Robert agreed. "But Patty, I'm worried. What if they put her in a foster home that's just as bad? What if Vincent fights for her? What if—" "We'll cross those bridges when we come to them," Patricia interrupted. "But right now, tonight, she's safe and fed and clean. That's what matters." After Lily finished her bath and put on the borrowed pajamas, she seemed like a different child, clean, warm, and fed. Some of the tension left her small shoulders. Patricia tucked her into the guest bed, and Lily clutched her stuffed rabbit close. "Miss Patricia?" Lily said quietly. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Patricia sat on the edge of the bed, her heart breaking at the question. "Because you deserve kindness, sweetheart. Every child does. And sometimes the world forgets that, but Robert and I remember." After Lily fell asleep, exhausted, Patricia came back downstairs and immediately grabbed her phone. That birthmark was bothering her. She opened her browser and started searching, not even sure what she was looking for. She typed in "crescent moon birthmark child" and started scrolling through images. Nothing jumped out. Then on a whim, she added "missing" to the search. The results changed. Articles about missing children, cold cases, unsolved disappearances. Patricia scrolled through them, and then her breath caught. "Bobby," she called out, her voice strange. "Bobby, come here right now." Robert rushed in from the kitchen. What's wrong?" Patricia's hands were trembling as she held out her phone. On the screen was a news article from 3 years ago. The headline read, "Princess Anastasia of Valdoria still missing after kidnapping." Below the headline was a photo. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, with blonde hair and striking violet blue eyes. She was wearing a fancy white dress and laughing at the camera. And in the corner of the image there was a smaller photo showing a distinctive birthmark on a child's shoulder blade. A crescent moon. "Oh my God," Robert whispered, taking the phone with shaking hands. They read the article together, their shock growing with every sentence. 3 years ago, Princess Anastasia of Valdoria, the only child of Queen Helena and King Stefan, had been kidnapped from the royal family's summer residence. The kidnapper's car had been found abandoned near the German border, but the child was never recovered. There had been no ransom demands, no communications. The case had gone cold after 18 months of intensive searching. Valdoria was a small European country, wealthy but not well known to most Americans. The kidnapping had been international news for a few months, then faded from public attention as time passed with no breaks in the case. Patricia scrolled further, finding more detailed articles. They listed Princess Anastasia's identifying characteristics: the violet blue eyes, a crescent moon birthmark on her left shoulder blade, a slight accent in her speech from being raised bilingual, and there in one article a quote from the Queen. Anastasia was a bright, articulate child who loved books and spoke with a formality beyond her years. "It can't be," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. "There must be thousands of kids with violet eyes and moon birthmarks." "Bobby, look at her." Patricia pulled up more photos of the princess. "Look at her nose, her chin, the shape of her face. Now go upstairs and look at Lily sleeping." Robert went upstairs, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake the child. He stood in the doorway of the guest room, looking at her peaceful face in the soft glow of the nightlight. Then he came back downstairs, and Patricia could see in his eyes that he saw it too. "What do we do?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If that's really her, if she's really a princess, we call the authorities," Patricia said firmly. "We call the FBI. This is way beyond anything we can handle." They spent the next hour reading everything they could find about the case. They learned that Vincent Petrov, the man Lily called her uncle, might be connected to a larger criminal network. The original investigation had suggested that the kidnapping was intended as an extortion plot against the Valdorian royal family. But something had gone wrong. The primary kidnappers had either been caught or killed, leaving the child with someone who didn't know what to do with her. Patricia looked at the photos of Queen Helena. an elegant woman with the same blonde hair and violet eyes as Lily. In every photo after the kidnapping, the queen looked haunted, aged beyond her years by grief. The king stood beside her in most photos, his face stern but his eyes empty. "They think she's dead," Patricia said softly. "Look at this article from last year. They held a memorial service. They said they needed closure." Robert sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "We've been harboring a princess on the number 47 bus route. A princess who's been declared dead by her own country." "She's not dead," Patricia said firmly. "She's upstairs in our guest room, sleeping with a stuffed rabbit. And we're going to give her back to her family." They called the FBI's Seattle office that night, even though it was nearly midnight. The agent who answered sounded skeptical at first, probably used to getting crank calls. But Patricia, with her years of experience dealing with official systems, knew how to be both firm and credible. She listed the facts calmly. The birthmark, the eyes, the age, the European accent, the timeline that matched. By 3 a.m, 2 FBI agents were sitting in their living room, looking at the photos on Patricia's phone and comparing them to Lily sleeping upstairs. They'd brought a database of the case files and were cross-referencing every detail. "We'll need to verify with DNA," the lead agent, a woman named Chen, said quietly. "But I've worked on this case. I know it inside and out. And if this isn't Princess Anastasia, it's the most incredible coincidence I've ever seen." The other agent, Rodriguez, was already making phone calls, his voice low and urgent. Patricia caught words like Interpol and royal family and verification. When Lily woke up around 6 a.m, confused about where she was, she came downstairs to find her room full of strangers. She immediately shrank back, fear crossing her face, but Robert was there in an instant. "It's okay, Lily," he said gently, kneeling down to her level. "These people are here to help. They're going to make sure you're safe, really safe, forever safe. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." "Is Uncle Vincent here?" Lily asked in a small voice. "No, honey," Patricia said, coming over to put a hand on Lily's shoulder. "And he's never going to be near you again. I promise you that." Agent Chen approached slowly, carefully, the way you'd approach a frightened animal. "Hi, Lily. I'm Agent Chen. I work for the FBI, which is like the police but for really important cases. Can I ask you some questions?" Over the next few hours, with child psychologists present and Patricia holding her hand, Lily told her story. The fragments she remembered. The big house with gardens. People calling her Your Highness, though she'd thought it was a game. Being taken by a man who said they were going on an adventure. Waking up in a car that smelled bad. Being moved from place to place. Ending up with Vincent, who told her that her old life was gone and nobody wanted her anymore. "Did Vincent ever call you anything other than Lily?" Agent Chen asked gently. "Sometimes he'd get mad and call me that royal brat," Lily said. "I never knew what he meant." The agents exchanged significant looks. Patricia watched as they made more calls, their voices excited now. DNA tests were fast-tracked. Calls were being made to Valdoria, to the royal family's private security, to Interpol, and through it all, Lily sat between Robert and Patricia, holding both their hands, not fully understanding what was happening but knowing somehow that her life was about to change again. "Am I in trouble?" she asked at one point, her voice small and scared. "No, sweetheart," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not in trouble. You're going home." The DNA results came back in just 8 hours, rushed through with priority that only a case this significant could command. Agent Chen pulled Patricia and Robert aside while Lily was napping in the guest room, exhausted from the morning's questioning. "It's a match," Chen said quietly, and Patricia watched as the agent's professional composure cracked slightly. "She's Princess Anastasia of Valdoria. We've just confirmed it with the royal family's genetic records. After 3 years, we found her." Robert had to sit down. His legs felt weak. That little girl upstairs, the one who'd been riding his bus for weeks, eating granola bars and sleeping in the back seat because she had nowhere else to go, was royalty, an actual princess who'd been mourned by an entire nation. "What happens now?" Patricia asked, though part of her didn't want to know. She'd gotten attached to Lily in just one night. The thought of her leaving hurt. "Right now, diplomatic protocols are being followed," Chen explained. "The Valdorian embassy has been contacted. The king and queen are being informed as we speak. They'll want to come immediately, but there are security considerations, travel arrangements, medical evaluations that need to happen. And Vincent, Robert asked, anger making his voice hard. He's been located and arrested. He's not talking yet, but we have him. He'll face charges in both the United States and Valdoria. Kidnapping, child abuse, a dozen other charges. He's never getting out. That afternoon, while federal agents quietly secured the house and neighborhood, Lily woke up to find Patricia sitting beside her bed. The older woman had been crying, and Lily immediately looked worried. "Did I do something wrong?" Lily asked, that familiar fear creeping into her voice. "No, baby, no," Patricia said quickly, pulling the child into a gentle hug. "You've done nothing wrong. I'm crying because I'm happy, because something wonderful is about to happen, and I'm just a silly old woman who gets emotional." "What's going to happen?" Lily asked, pulling back to look at Patricia's face. Patricia took a deep breath. This was the moment. "Lily, honey, we need to talk about who you really are. Your name isn't Lily, it's Anastasia. And 3 years ago, when you were very little, some bad people took you away from your real family. Your mommy and daddy have been looking for you ever since." Lily's face went through several expressions at once: confusion, disbelief, fear, and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "I knew my name wasn't always Lily," she whispered. "Sometimes in my dreams I hear someone calling Anastasia, and it feels like they mean me. But Vincent said I was making things up." "You weren't making anything up," Patricia said firmly. "Your parents are the king and queen of a country called Valdoria. That's why you remember the big house and the gardens and people being formal around you. That was your home. That was your real life. So I'm a princess?" Lily asked, and she sounded more confused than excited. "Yes, sweetheart. You're a princess. And your parents, your real parents, they love you so much. They never stopped looking for you. And in a day or two, they're going to come here to see you." Lily was quiet for a long time processing this information. Then she asked the question that broke Patricia's heart. "Will they still want me, now that I'm like this?" Patricia cupped the child's face gently. "Like what, honey?" "Broken," Lily said simply. "Vincent said I was damaged goods, that I wasn't special anymore, that I was just a problem nobody wanted." "Listen to me," Patricia said fiercely. "You are not broken. You are not damaged. You are a strong, brave, beautiful girl who survived something terrible. Your parents are going to be so proud of you, and they're going to love you exactly as you are." Over the next day and a half, the house became a hub of activity. Medical professionals came to examine Lily gently, documenting her injuries and making sure she was physically okay. Child psychologists talked with her, preparing her for the reunion. Security personnel set up equipment and swept the area. The media had somehow caught wind of the story, and news vans started appearing down the street, kept at bay by police barriers. Through it all, Robert and Patricia stayed close to Lily. They'd been told that once the royal family arrived, their role would be over. They'd have to step back and let Lily's real parents take over. Both of them were trying to prepare for that goodbye, and both were failing miserably. "I don't want you to go," Lily admitted the night before her parents were due to arrive. She was curled up between Robert and Patricia on their couch, the three of them watching a cartoon that Lily had picked. "Can I stay with you and also have a mom and dad?" "Life doesn't work quite like that, sweetheart," Robert said, his voice rough. "But your parents, they're good people. They're going to give you everything you need. A real home, a real family, safety, love, education, everything Vincent kept from you." "But I'll miss you," Lily said and started crying. "You're the first people who were nice to me in so long. You're the only ones who cared." Patricia was crying too now, holding Lily close. "We'll always care. And who knows? Maybe we can visit. Maybe we can write letters. Maybe this isn't a complete goodbye." The next morning came too fast. Robert and Patricia dressed carefully, feeling oddly nervous. Lily wore a new dress that had been brought by someone from the embassy, pale blue and simple but clearly expensive. She looked terrified. The meeting was set up in a secure building downtown, not at the house for security and privacy reasons. As they drove there in a black SUV surrounded by security vehicles, Lily held tight to Robert's hand on one side and Patricia's on the other. Inside the building, they were led to a private room. It was comfortable, decorated to look less institutional and more like a nice living room. Agents and officials stood around the perimeter. And at one end of the room stood two people. Queen Helena and King Stefan of Valdoria looked exactly like their photos, but somehow more real, more human. The queen was wearing a simple blue dress, no crown or jewels. The king was in a dark suit. Both of them had eyes only for Lily, For a moment, nobody moved. Lily stared at them, her little face working through emotions. The queen had her hand over her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. The king's jaw was tight, like he was fighting to maintain control. Then Lily whispered, "Mama." It was like a dam broke. The queen made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob and dropped to her knees. "Anastasia, my baby, my little star." Lily let go of Robert and Patricia's hands and ran. She crashed into her mother's arms, and the queen wrapped around her like she'd never let go again. The king joined them, his arms around both his wife and daughter, and all three of them were crying. "I'm sorry," Lily was saying through her tears. "I'm sorry I got lost. I'm sorry I forgot you." "No, no, no," the queen said, pulling back to look at her daughter's face, touching it like she couldn't believe it was real. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You were taken from us, but you're here now. You're alive. You're ours again." Robert and Patricia stood back, holding each other, both crying openly. Around them, hardened FBI agents and security personnel were wiping their eyes. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The king looked up and saw Robert and Patricia. He stood, helping his wife and daughter up with him, and walked over. He was an imposing man, tall and dignified, but his face was soft with emotion. "You're Robert and Patricia," he said. His English was perfect with just a slight accent. "The bus driver and his wife who saved our daughter?" "We just did what anyone would do," Robert started, but the king shook his head. "No, not anyone. Most people would have looked away. Would have decided it wasn't their problem. You saw our daughter when she was invisible to the world. You gave her food, kindness, safety. You gave us back our child." His voice broke on the last word. The queen came over too, still holding Anastasia's hand. "How can we ever thank you? How can we ever repay what you've done?" "She doesn't need repaying," Patricia said, looking at Lily. "She just needs love and time and healing. That's all we wanted for her." Anastasia was looking between her parents and Robert and Patricia, her face uncertain. "Do I have to choose?" she asked in a small voice. "Choose what, my love?" the queen asked gently. "Between you and them." "Because I don't want to. I just got a family again. And now I'm losing another one." The king and queen exchanged a long look, one of those wordless conversations that long married couples can have. Then the queen knelt down to Anastasia's level. "You're not losing anyone, little star. Robert and Patricia will always be part of your life if they're willing. They're the people who brought you back to us. They're heroes. And in our country, we honor our heroes." She looked up at Robert and Patricia. "Would you consider coming to Valdoria? Not just to visit, but to be part of Anastasia's recovery, her adjustment. We have much to offer you in terms of gratitude, but more than that, our daughter needs you. She trusts you. And right now, trust is the most precious thing she has to give." Robert and Patricia looked at each other, stunned. They'd been preparing to say goodbye, and instead they were being invited into a completely new chapter. "We'd be honored," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "If we can help Lily Anastasia, if we can help her feel safe and loved, then yes. 1,000 times yes." Anastasia broke away from her mother and threw her arms around Robert, then Patricia. "You're really coming with me?" she asked, hope lighting up her face. "We're really coming," Robert confirmed, hugging her tight. As the adults made arrangements and talked about next steps, Anastasia sat between all four of her protectors, 2 who'd given her life and 2 who'd given it back. She was still scared, still processing, still healing from years of trauma, but for the first time in 3 years she was surrounded by people who loved her, and that, as it turned out, was what princesses really needed. Not castles or crowns, but love, and people who refused to give up on them. The private jet that carried them to Valdoria was unlike anything Robert and Patricia had ever experienced. Leather seats, elegant meals served on real china, and a bedroom where Anastasia could rest during the long flight. But what struck them most was how the royal family's staff treated Anastasia. Not like a fragile piece of glass, but like a real child who'd been through something difficult and needed patience and kindness. Anastasia spent most of the flight between her parents and Robert and Patricia, moving back and forth like a bridge between her old life and her new one. She'd curl up with her mother for a while, then get restless and go sit with Patricia. She'd hold her father's hand, then ask Robert to tell her stories about his bus route. She was trying to reconcile 2 worlds that felt completely different, and everyone could see the effort it took. "Tell me about Valdoria," Anastasia asked her father at one point. "I don't remember very much." King Stefan's face was patient as he pulled out his phone and showed her pictures. It's a small country, but very beautiful. Mountains and lakes, old castles, and modern cities. Our palace is in the capital, Meridian. You used to love the gardens there. You had a favorite spot under an old willow tree where you'd read books for hours. I still like reading, Anastasia said quietly. When I could get books, Patricia sent me some on the bus. The Queen reached over and squeezed Patricia's hand, her eyes wet with gratitude. These small details, these tiny kindnesses, meant everything to her. When they landed in Valdoria, there was no public ceremony waiting. The King and Queen had made it clear that Anastasia needed privacy and time, not parades and press conferences. They were driven in an unmarked car to the palace, entering through a private entrance. The palace was beautiful, but the King and Queen had made sure Anastasia's rooms were redecorated to feel less intimidating. Instead of formal portraits and antique furniture, there were soft colors, cozy chairs, and shelves waiting to be filled with books and toys. A team of child psychologists and doctors were on standby, but had been instructed to move at Anastasia's pace. Robert and Patricia were given a suite in the guest wing, close enough to Anastasia's rooms that she could reach them easily. For the first week, they barely saw the rest of the palace. Their world was just Anastasia and her parents, figuring out how to be a family again. It wasn't easy. Anastasia had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming about Vincent or being locked in dark rooms. Sometimes she'd run to her parents, sometimes to Robert and Patricia. The King and Queen, instead of being offended, were grateful that their daughter had anyone she felt safe with. During the day, Anastasia slowly explored her home. She'd remember things in flashes. "I fell off that wall when I was little," she'd say, pointing to a garden wall. Or, "Someone used to play piano in that room and I'd dance." Each memory was celebrated, written down, treated as the precious thing it was. But there were hard moments too. Once a palace staff member raised his voice at someone else in the hallway, and Anastasia hid in a closet for 2 hours, convinced she was about to be punished. Another time, she hoarded food under her bed, unable to trust that meals would keep coming. The Queen found the stash and didn't scold her, just held her daughter and promised that she'd never go hungry again. Patricia, with her background in social work, became invaluable. She helped the King and Queen understand trauma responses, explained why certain things triggered their daughter, and gave them strategies for helping her heal. She also just sat with Anastasia sometimes, doing normal things like reading or drawing, giving the child a sense of routine and safety. Robert's role was different, but just as important. He represented the outside world, the normal world. He told Anastasia stories about regular people doing regular jobs. He taught her card games and bad jokes. He reminded her that being a princess didn't mean she couldn't also be a regular kid who liked silly things and made mistakes. 2 months after arriving in Valdoria, there was a formal ceremony. Not for the public, but for Robert and Patricia. In the palace's historic throne room, with just family and close advisors present, the King bestowed upon them the Order of the Golden Lion, the nation's highest civilian honor. "Robert and Patricia," the King said, his voice formal but warm, "you are hereby recognized as heroes of the realm and guardians of the crown. Your courage, compassion, and dedication saved not just my daughter, but the future of our nation. Valdoria is forever in your debt, but more meaningful than the medals was what came next." The Queen stepped forward, Anastasia by her side. "We have another honor to bestow," the Queen said. "In Valdoria, there is an old tradition. When someone saves the life of a royal child, they may be named as godparents, as honorary family. If you're willing, we'd like to make this official. You would be recognized as Anastasia's godparents with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Patricia started crying immediately. Robert had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. "We'd be honored," he finally managed. "More honored than we can say." Anastasia broke protocol by running forward and hugging them both. "This means you're really my family now," she said. "Forever family." "Forever family," Patricia agreed, holding her tight. As the months went on, Anastasia continued to heal. She started school with a private tutor at first, then gradually joined a small class with other children. She made friends slowly, learning to trust again. She started therapy, talking about her experiences with professionals who knew how to help her process the trauma. Robert and Patricia stayed for 6 months initially, then decided to return to Seattle. They had their own life to get back to, their own family and friends, but they promised to visit often, and the king and queen promised that Anastasia could visit them too. The goodbye at the airport was tearful but not final. They all knew they'd see each other again soon. Back in Seattle, Robert returned to driving Route 47. But now everything was different. He'd get recognized sometimes, people who'd seen the story on the news. Most were respectful. Some wanted to shake his hand or thank him. He'd just smile and say he'd done what anyone should do. But he knew that wasn't quite true. Most people had looked past Lily on that bus for weeks before he'd noticed her. Most people were too busy with their own lives to see a neglected child. He'd been lucky enough to pay attention, and that attention had changed everything. Patricia got involved with organizations that helped missing children and supported foster care reform. She couldn't save every child, but she could use her experience to help improve the systems that were supposed to protect them. True to their promise, Anastasia visited Seattle 6 months later. She came with security, of course, and there was media attention, but the king and queen had arranged for private time too. Anastasia rode Route 47 with Robert one morning, sitting in her old seat, and this time she was laughing and chatting with other passengers instead of silent and afraid. "This is where my new life started," she told a curious passenger who'd asked why a princess was on a city bus. "Right here in this seat, the day I met Robert." Every year after that, Anastasia would visit. Sometimes Robert and Patricia would visit Valdoria too. They watched her grow from a traumatized 7-year-old into a confident, compassionate teenager. She excelled in school, became an advocate for missing children, and never forgot where she'd come from. The palace established the Robert Chen Foundation for Missing and Exploited Children, funding search efforts and support services around the world. Thousands of children were helped because of the attention Anastasia's case had brought to the issue. On her 16th birthday, Anastasia gave a speech at a foundation event. Robert and Patricia were in the front row, as they always were for her important moments. "When I was 7 years old and riding a bus alone every morning, I thought I was nobody," Anastasia said, her voice clear and strong. "I thought I was just a problem, something to be hidden away and ignored. But one man decided to pay attention. One man decided that I mattered. And his wife decided the same thing. They didn't know I was a princess. They just knew I was a child who needed help." She looked directly at Robert and Patricia. "They taught me that worth isn't about titles or crowns. It's about how you treat others when nobody's watching. It's about kindness given freely to someone who can't repay you. They saved my life, but more than that, they taught me how to live." After the speech, as cameras flashed and people applauded, Anastasia came straight to Robert and Patricia. She wasn't wearing her formal princess demeanor anymore, just being the girl they'd helped raise. "Thank you," she said, hugging them both, "for everything, for seeing me, for caring, for never giving up." "Thank you," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion, "for trusting us, for being brave enough to accept help, for becoming this amazing person."